interesting moment for newspapers because they've got a shot, I think. But they've got a shot. That's what they've got.
I'll also just say I totally agree with Alex, but I also think that we're just at the very beginning here, right? You know, WikiLeaks, which is kind of a complicated discussion to have about it because I have some reservations about it, but we're just at the very beginning of a whole bunch of new ways and approaches to investigative journalism in different forms, in different institutions that are outside of the traditional news institutions. I just think that we're like in the we're like in the age of, we're back to when whales were still cows walking the plains before they evolved into the ocean into whales. Which, by the way, is true. Whales are essentially evolutionary descendants of bovines.
No kidding. I feel like we've learned something.
You learned the most interesting things from Nicco.
Thank you. Okay, questions, comments? Raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead. You go first. Ladies first. You need a mic, though.
Following the rules.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Alwyn Castle with the Center for Studying Health Systems.
Speak up.
You have to turn it on there, right? Hello? 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 I can speak up. No one has ever accused me of not being able to be heard. 2 points. One, I want to challenge Nicco's assumption that, this is a great time to be in journalism. I deal with reporters all day long, and it is not such a great time. Every time I send out a news release, I get emails back, oh, I'm out on furlough this week, I'm, no such user known. And the other point that I want to make, and I'd like to get your reaction to it, because I think you danced around it, is the disaggregation of news that we get based on our own interests, that there is no authoritative common message that we get anymore in a coherent way about what is important. And that is, I don't know, I think it's a public good. And I don't know what the business model is that supports that.
Well, on the second point, the disaggregation news, that predates the internet substantially. I mean, that's cable news. There's lots of, that's a broader cultural trend. I'd also say, there are both good things and bad things about the age we're living in, of this tremendous explosion of media opportunity. One of the good things is, in a lot of things you're really interested in, you can find a lot that are fairly niche. You can find a lot of interesting people writing about them, right? What drove me to blogs in the first place was I was living in DC, I moved to New York, it was 2001, and I was like a political animal. I want to know what's happening in the midterms, right? And my new employer doesn't get the hotline, right? And I have no idea what's going on. And I go on the internet and I discover there are all these blogs that are really written by amateurs, by people who come home from their day jobs doing totally other things and are writing about the Senate race in Oregon or the House race, whatever. And this was like the most exciting thing. Like, why do you need the hotline? Like, there was all this great discussion, and not just discussion, but I think, I don't think it was hardcore investigative journalism, but it was a kind of like citizen journalism covering these races. And I could follow what was going on in, the Oregon Senate race a full 12 months before the election, and it was never going to be in the New York Times, right, or any major mainstream media, because it was too narrow, right, in any daily sense. And so there are good parts to this kind of great disaggregation as well. In the first point, it's, I have a lot of students in my class who are journalists who are very nervous about their career prospects. And there's no doubt that the economic model for the institutions that have traditionally funded journalism are in really rickety shape. How much of that is the internet's fault? I don't know. Like, should newspapers be publicly traded or owned by hedge funds seeking significant, significant profit margins that, as Alex said, there are plenty of comfortable profit margins in newspapers, but 60%? I don't know. So a lot of the problems with the traditional models of the news industry, I'm not sure how much of the internet's played a role in those. It's not the sole boogeyman here. It's always the bankers. The bankers are the problem, right? But I still think it's an exciting time for journalism, and I try and tell my friends and students who are journalists, there's a lot of things you can be doing right now. There's a lot of ways you can be reporting. You can, you have a media platform at your own disposal that you can build and report on, and the way that you're going to pay the bills, that's a fine question. I think that's a dangerous question, but I actually think there are a lot of opportunities, but they're going to be non-traditional, and it's not going to be the same kind of life as working for a traditional news agency.
Can I address something that you basically have implied but have not said, I think? And it's an interesting philosophical question, because one of the things that the people who really are believers in the democratic impact of the web is that it levels the playing field, it destroys the hierarchies, it makes it much more of a democratic, interactive, anybody can speak, everybody has a voice. I am a believer that most of us yearn for someone who we trust to take on the onerous job of deciding what is more important, what is less important, what do we need to know about, what not. Because one of the things that I worked at the New York Times for many years, and I know how many hours, hundreds of hours, go into not just the reporting, but the editing, the refining, the deciding what goes where, how it's calibrated. The New York Times, the Washington Post every morning on their front page basically have done an enormous amount of intellectual, highly skilled, highly committed work in just presenting to you a snapshot still of the world, of what's going on and what you need to know about. The problem that I see with the digital model is that increasingly, I believe, it is not giving a flat picture, it is giving a narrower picture that is tailored to an individual's interests, but it is a set of interests that is at the cost of things that you did not know that you needed to know or wanted to know or had some interest in, because it is increasingly able to be tailored exactly to you. So you're sort of out there, not as a part of a public, you're out there as a genuine single individual, an individual that has a network of social connections, but they tend to be people like you. They tend to be people that share your beliefs. So you're, I believe, increasingly, not because it's not available, but your time is limited, your attention is limited, your energy is limited, and so what you get, I believe, increasingly, is not something more democratic and broad, but something less, because you don't have a sort of arbiter out there making these choices on your behalf, or maybe usurping your ability to sort of pursue your own interests, depending on how you look at it. But it's a complicated equation.
I do think it's complicated. I think, the New York Times has an order of magnitude more visitors to their homepage than they do subscribers. The New York Times reach arguably is greater today than it's ever been in its entire
there's no
history,
question,
right? And so, there are definitely a lot more news sources, but how disaggregated it's actually getting. I mean, people who choose to be, I'm curious as to how disaggregated it's really
I think
getting.
the statistics I've seen is